Welcome back to the Bible in Context,
where context is king and the original author's intent drives our interpretation. So how you doing, Caleb?
Doing good. Glad to be back.
Yes.
It might sound a little different because we're remote. Also, this is round 2 for this episode since we recorded it and lost it. So, looking forward to this.
Yes. If you don't laugh, you cry. We lost so much.
It was a lot. We tried to knock a lot of things out at once, and it didn't work well. So here we are back to our normal method of 1 or 2 at a time. But I think this one's going to be a good one, and this was probably one that's good for us to have talked about beforehand because we're going to talk about the meaning of the language of grace that Paul uses in Ephesians. So really quickly, just to sum up where we've been before we get there, last time we talked a lot about the whole idea that election and predestination in Ephesians 1 is not about individual election and predestination for salvation, but is about the fact that Christ he is the elect one, and he is predestined before the foundation of the world to be the one who rules over all things. In him, by believing in him, we join him in that status of predestination and election. And it's not about individual election and salvation, it's about Christ being elect and predestined, and it's about us being part of the community that is elect and predestined in him. Barring the predestined in verse 11, which we talked about. Scholars see this especially being the part where it differentiates between the Jews and the Gentiles who are believing, or the apostles and the Gentiles. And that occurrence of predestined applies only to the Jews, actually. And so this isn't about a predestination, again, about a salvation. It's about the Jews being predestined before the current period. They were predestined at Sinai. Since Sinai, they had been destined to be the ones who were working out the purpose of God's will to bring all the nations in under himself.
Right. So like what we were trying to get across was when it talks about predestination, it's not so much talking about that they were predestined for salvation, but it was more that they were predestined to be God's chosen people, to
his tool.
His tool to really go and be a light to the nations, to bring the nations to him. Yeah.
I say tool. Doesn't make it sound so glorious, but yes, it was a glorious purpose. They were representatives of God.
Yes. Yeah, that's what they were predestined for, to be his representatives.
Yeah.
So, and so that's the good news of Ephesians is that now the Gentiles have been invited into that glorious role and calling, and that they can be part of the predestined family. Community. Yeah.
And so now all that stuff from verses 1 up to verses 10, that kind of vicariously applies to all of us as Christians, even though 1 through 10 may have been about only Jews, it may have been about the whole church. It's kind of hard to discern that, I think. 11 through 14 is definitely the we are the Jews and the apostles, and the you are the believing Gentiles who have now been brought in. Go back and listen to the last episode for more on that, but we'll jump in around verse 5 here, and we want to talk a little bit about, again, God's grace that we see in verse 6. And so in verse 5, I'll start there. He predestined us for adoption to himself as sons through Jesus Christ according to the purpose of his will. Now, real quick, I think I've said this already, but what is the purpose of God's will in Ephesians?
The purpose of God's will in Ephesians would be that all nations or all peoples would be brought together under Christ.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah, and he mentions later in this passage to bring all things in under him. And in the context, that all things is referring to the peoples that he's talking to, the Jews and the Gentiles, bringing what you just said, bringing all the nations under Jesus. And so that is the purpose of his will. And then Paul continues on with that thought from verse 5 into verse 6, saying, to the praise of his glorious grace, with which he blessed us in the beloved. So, God's glorious grace. I think first let's talk about the term glory here. So what do you think of, or what do you think most people think of when they hear the word glory?
Yeah, I think they think of just like a really bright light that is almost blinding. I think of the Apostle Paul on the way to Damascus having his vision of the risen Christ where he's blinded for 3 days because he got a glimpse of the glory of Christ. I think that's what a lot of people think.
Yeah, and there are a couple places in the New Testament where they start to use the term glory as sort of in a way as referring to light or to wealth and riches. But that's not really what is at the heart of the term glory, and that's not how it's used most of the time. That's just kind of a Greek abstraction that they bring into it. But throughout the Bible, throughout the Old Testament and the New Testament, the term glory, whether it's doxa in Greek or kavod in Hebrew, those do not communicate light, or it's not about wealth, riches, or things like that that we associate with glory often. And so what is glory actually? So
in the conversation that we erased earlier, we had a great conversation about this. But it was helpful, and you actually were the one that I don't want to pretend like I came up with this. I mean, you were the one that really
I gave you a chance there to cheat and to just take the credit for it.
I did, and I didn't want to cheat. I want to give you the credit for this because it was really helpful for me to better understand the way that you described glory as more like honor, God's honor.
Yeah, when someone is glorious, they have a good reputation, they have a good name. And that's all the way back to Genesis 12. Like, I will give you a name. Those promises are all wrapped up in glory, honor, reputation, name. That's the ideas that are behind the idea of glory. Not unapproachable light, not wealth and riches. Those are signs of God's gloriousness, of how great that He is, but they are not the aspects of His character that make Him of good reputation, honorable, to have a good name. The things that do give Him honor and give Him a good reputation are things like the grace that He shows to people. That's why He says, to the praise of His glorious grace. Or Exodus 34:6 displays the way that God wants His reputation to be known. Those are the backbone of His glory. Those are His character and the reputation that He has given Himself in the world, where it says that He is a God merciful and gracious, slow to anger, abounding in steadfast love and faithfulness, and so on.
And so the idea of us like bearing His name is calling for us to represent Him and bring Him glory by spreading the glory of Christ, His character, His renown, His reputation around the world.
Yeah, and so I have a few verses here too I want us to both read just to show you that I'm not making this up, because this may be very surprising for some, because, well, I think formerly I thought of glory. I can understand, like, if a general or someone who's famous has glory, it's because of their actions that have given them a certain reputation. Their glory is their reputation, their name, the actions they have done. When they walk in the room, there's a weight that walks into the room because they have glory, because of their actions or whatever, their reputation. Typically, when I hear glory talked about in a biblical sense, God's glory is the end of all creation. That is the purpose of all creation, is God's glory. What we're going to see here is that God's glory is actually a tool that He is using. While we do praise God for His glory, rightfully so, the praise of His glory is not the end-all be-all, the ultimate final goal of God attaining glory. He's actually going to use His glory for something else.
Yeah, it's not just the praise. I mean, God appreciates our praise and of His glory, but His glory is meant to spread. His glory is meant to go out.
Yeah.
It's not meant just for us to look at.
Yeah, and I think that I want to hone in on that for a second, because the tradition that I kind of came out of, that would have been I think I would have been very wary of anyone who said that. Would have been like, you are saying something almost heretical, because I've been taught my entire life by certain preachers that I still respect and have taught me a lot of good things. They say that the purpose of everything is God's glory. And so if you're saying that it's actually an instrument for something else, you're putting glory below another purpose, and therefore you're demeaning God's glory. And that's not what we're doing.
Right.
Does that make sense? Do you resonate with that at all, or maybe one of your past selves?
I mean, and I'm trying to, and I know some of the teachings that you're talking about that, and so like the chief end of man is to glorify God and enjoy Him together, right? The first part of the Catechism, Westminster.
And I will say that's actually the chief end of man is found in the image of God, which is not quite that definition you just gave.
Right.
We'll get back to that.
But yeah, I mean that foundational teaching though is very influential in a lot of books, a lot of sermons that we hear still today. Yeah. And it's not that it's completely wrong, I think, but I think it's not complete, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's just slightly off the mark, I think. It gives us a different emphasis,
right,
on what the gospel is trying to point towards, perhaps.
Yeah.
Again, this is something about fine-tuning nuances and emphasis, not rewriting any doctrine or any foundational truths. So real quick, I want to go back to that, what you just cited. The chief end of man is to glorify God and enjoy Him forever. I think the chief end language can be a little misleading, but let me rephrase it. What is the purpose of humanity?
I would say to reflect God's glory.
And where is the first place you see that idea?
we are made in God's image in Genesis 1.
Right. You can go back and listen to the episodes that we did on the image of God very early on. The image of God is someone they embody or are given the status of being an ambassador for God, being a representative of Him, a priest, a governor, a co-ruler of creation. That is our purpose, to represent God and co-rule creation with Him and spread the goodness of God out into the bad as we do that. That is the purpose. I won't say chief end because I feel like that can just get into, it's kind of a hairy phrase, but our purpose is to be the image of God.
Right.
Which will entail, if we truly understand who our leader is, who Christ is, we're going to praise, we're going to appreciate His grace, we're going to ascribe Him glory, we're going to see Him as honorable, as of good reputation.
Well, and I was going to say, like, some of the teachers that I think would really push forward the first catechism that we talked about before, the chief end of man is to glorify God and enjoy Him forever. They would also say that the result of that would be to, like, our natural response to God's glory is to praise and to spread that praise throughout the world. But again, it's a nuance of, is our goal to go and is our primary goal to go and help everybody around the world come to a place where they praise and worship Jesus, because it's part of it, and I don't want to deny that. Yeah. But it seems like what we're trying to get at here is it's the main purpose is for us simply to go and spread His glory in the sense of that we represent Him and His character, His love. We're bringing, like you said, good into the bad. We're bringing light into the darkness. We're bringing order into the chaos.
Yeah, and that's why in Revelation He doesn't say, those who persevere will sit in my pews and get the holy hymn book for the rest of eternity. He says, those who persevere will sit on my throne with me.
Yeah. And there is worship in that. I mean, those that are on the throne are bowing down and they're worshiping, and that's part of it. So we don't want to deny that at all, and that's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, all throughout eternity we'll be saying, like, God, you're a good leader.
Yeah.
This is good to be part of your kingdom.
Right.
But God is not, to put this the most, I think, negative way you could, and the reason I want to say it this way is because a lot of people who don't trust the Bible, they voice this concern, and I get it. I kind of had the question in the back of my mind as I was just saying, like, God, I trust you, but I don't fully understand this plan. But a lot of people who don't trust the Bible will say, God is in this all for His glory. God is just the ultimate narcissist. He created us just so that He could, in this kind of messed up world, also in the end, He would have some people to tell Him that He's cool. Like, is that the Bible story? Is that the hope that we are longing for? Is that why God gets glory? Is just so that He can, just for His own self-satisfaction? Or is there something else going on there?
Okay, so here's a question for you. We didn't talk about this last time, so...
okay.
But I'm gonna
See, this is good. It's good we did it twice.
What do you say to... Like, I've heard Piper talk about that the reason God is not a narcissist, even though he demands worship from everyone, is that, okay, what is the greatest gift in the universe that God could give us? Well, it would be Himself. And so God's demand to be adored and to be loved is really His gift to us. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
I would say find it in the Bible.
Okay. Well, and it still comes a little,
I think,
across, to me at least, it comes across a little bit narcissistic. Like, hey, look at me, I'm awesome, worship me.
Yeah, I think that, and I bought the philosophy of God's glory is so good, enjoying His glory is so good, that it is better to be created and suffer and then enjoy His glory rather than not be created at all. And that's kind of what Piper and others are saying. And that's not based on any Bible. It's people trying to take the framework they have and build a philosophy that makes it make sense. And a lot of people buy it. I don't think you can find like anything in the Bible that says the greatest gift God could give us is Himself. I think there's a lot of things in the Bible talking about how great He is and how He is our only true and good King, but those specific philosophical frameworks you're not going to find. You're going to find glory used for an entirely different purpose in the Bible. And the whole goal is, whenever you look at eternity or the age to come, I should say, in the Bible, you don't see. You do see worship, but you don't see a lot of just like the kind of pictures we like to paint of just like endless basking in God's light or endless basking in his quote unquote, glory as we typically think of it as Americans. What you do see is, especially in like the prophets, you see restoration of God's people who are flourishing and growing and spreading God's kingdom. And in the New Testament, you see a lot more of the same thing in different terms, where it's all nations who are growing and flourishing and being blessed and having wellness and sitting on God's throne with him, judging angels, co-ruling with him. So that's kind of the image you get, is being restored back to that image of God, where humanity is in the garden. It's not an endless worship service. It's co-ruling in God's space with him, dwelling in his presence.
Yeah. Okay, so taking this back to Ephesians and taking a look at verses 5 and 6 again, in light of everything that we've just talked about.
Well, hang on. I think we should, before we do that, read a few Old Testament verses just to show that I'm not crazy, because
that's right.
I feel like you could hear this and be like, what do you mean God's glory is a tool for something else? I want to show this as a biblical idea, and this will be crystal clear once we read a few verses. Okay. And so remember that the idea of God's reputation or his name and his honor, his glory, those are all the same idea. So read Exodus 19:16.
All right,
and this is God talking to Pharaoh.
But for this purpose I have raised you up to show you my power, so that my name or my glory may be proclaimed in all the earth.
Okay, so what's going on here? What is God doing with his glory?
He's showing his glory with a powerful manifestation. Yeah. The plagues, but the purpose of it is not for others just to simply bow down and worship him, but to
make his light brighter, or
yeah, it doesn't make his light brighter, but it is to proclaim to the world his honor.
He's doing things. He's accomplishing actions that are going to give him a reputation throughout all the earth.
Yeah,
and that's what he does here.
So his renown and his reputation.
Right. Yeah. And then you get to Joshua 2, 9 through 11, and in those verses, I won't read those, but Rahab mentions that since the Exodus, God has made a reputation for himself, and now all the nations fear the power that he showed against the Egyptians, and they honor Israel because of it. And then Rahab, she even, because of that, she joins herself to Israel. So God increasing his good reputation, his honor, has had its effect in Rahab. The world has heard about Yahweh now, and someone is joining God's people. That's the purpose of God's glory. So, okay, there's a lot more verses I want to read, and I want to keep going through this just to show this is a theme throughout the Old Testament, not just one isolated verse or two that I've picked up and said, look, I have a new doctrine for you.
Right.
So, Joshua 4:23 through 24, what's that say?
For the Lord your God dried up the waters of the Jordan for you until you passed over, as the Lord your God did to the Red Sea, which he dried up for us until we passed over, so that all the peoples of the earth may know that the hand of the Lord is mighty, that you may fear the Lord your God forever.
Okay, so again, this is a reference back to the Exodus and to the drying up of the Jordan River, and this all goes back to God showing his glory, how mighty he is, his character to all peoples. Yeah, and so again, a lot of these are references, right? And a lot of these are references back to the Exodus event as kind of the archetype of this theme. And so we see this again in Psalm 106, 7 through 8. I'll read that one. And it says, Our fathers, when they were in Egypt, did not consider your wondrous works. They did not remember the abundance of your steadfast love, but they rebelled by the sea at the Red Sea. Yet he saved them for his name's sake, that he might make known his mighty power. So once again, he saved the people at the Exodus so that he could increase the goodness of his reputation, increase his honor among the earth, so that people will see him as honorable and come to him. We see the same thing in verse 9. Can you read that one?
But I acted for the sake of my name, my honor, my glory, my reputation, that it should not be profaned in the sight of the nations among whom they lived, in whose sight I made myself known to them in bringing them out of the land of Egypt. So another reference to the Exodus.
Yeah, and then we see the same thing again in Nehemiah 9, verse 10, where it says, And he performed signs and wonders against Pharaoh and all his servants and all the people of his land, for you knew that they acted arrogantly against our fathers, and you made a name for yourself, as it is to this day. And again, in Isaiah 59:19, this is in the midst of a discussion of Yahweh coming to defeat the nations that are oppressing Israel and to give vengeance for them and redeem them. And Isaiah says in 59, verse 19. So they shall fear the name of Yahweh from the east to the west, and his glory from the rising of the sun, as in like from the far east. For he will come like a rushing stream, which the wind of Yahweh drives. And so, again, we just have all this language referencing back to the Exodus and to new Exodus events with people coming out of exile. And all of this is for God to establish a name for himself so the nations will know him. And why do the nations need to know him? What was the purpose of the establishment of Israel in Exodus 19?
To be a kingdom of priests that would draw the nations to Yahweh.
Yeah. God's actions, and he wants the actions of his people to be a reflection of his honor and his character so that they will attract the nations to him.
So when the idea of glory very much is tied up with the idea of redemption.
Yeah. God delivers so that people will see his honor and come to him so that he can deliver them as well.
Yeah. So, okay, now can we go back to Ephesians?
Yeah, go ahead.
So let's go back to Ephesians, and going back to verses 5 and 6. So he predestined us for adoption to himself as sons through Jesus Christ, according to the purpose of his will, okay? And so we talked about that being, what's the purpose of his will? To draw all nations under Christ, that they would put their allegiance in Christ. Why? To the praise of his glorious grace. And so I think those phrases fit so well together, because the purpose of his will is to draw all nations to Christ, that they would see his renown, see his glory. And so it's to the praise of Christ's glory. It's to the praise of his renown, his reputation, his redeeming work, that they would come and be saved and forgiven and redeemed. So I don't know, it just adds a whole nother layer to the meaning of that phrase.
You read this, and I think you get you see a lot more of God's compassion and his character that you see in Exodus 34:6. Again, whenever you read this as to the praise of his glorious grace, not for the eternal worship service where we just, finally get to say God is cool for all of eternity, but where God is making his honor known by showing us grace so that others will see that and say, I want God's grace too, and then he will give it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so to sum this up, I think it kind of helps to talk about why you see this in Jesus forgiving. Jesus evangelized to forgive, and then he forgave to evangelize. He came and he preached a kingdom to his people in order that they would turn and he would forgive them. And then he forgave them so that others would see that and also believe the gospel.
Yeah.
So I think it's a simple phrase, but I think it helps to see that's what glory is doing. Jesus evangelized to forgive, and he forgave to evangelize.
That's so good. I like it. I'm going to steal that phrase.
All right, go for it. I feel like it's short and sweet. It needs explanation, but we did the explaining. But I feel like, a short and sweet little phrase like that occasionally helps remember some things. And I feel like this is an important topic. It needs a short and sweet phrase. So we'll go ahead and wrap this one up, and then we'll just briefly touch on the rest of chapter 1 in the next episode, and then we'll get into chapter 2.
All right, sounds good.